Pawn shop workers of Reddit. What is the dumbest thing a customer has brought in thinking they were gonna strike us rich? I'm a pawnbroker. Somebody brought in their dead grandmother's gold tooth, plucked from her ashes, with the tooth still in it. We told her that the tooth had to be separated from the gold for us to weigh it. They desecrated their loved one's remains for less than $2. A guy literally brought in an RPG. He was doing yard work for this old lady whose husband had passed. She gave it to him for doing some yard work, not realizing it was live and active. The guy was career military, and after the bomb squad came and disabled it, they went to her house and found a trove of similarly very illegal military grade weapons. Oh, that kind of RPG. A kid from my school had a letter signed by Abraham Lincoln. He brought it to show and tell one day, and we were all super impressed. In grade 12, he stole it from his dad and went to pawn it. He bragged about how he was going to be rich. It turns out his grandfather forged the letter and gave it to his dad as a gift. A friend's uncle allowed us to shadow him for a day at his pawn shop. A guy walked in with a metal lockbox and said he had something worth billions. He opened the lockbox and there were wood chips in it and the smell of spray paint. He claimed they were leftovers of the cross Jesus was crucified on. He is descended from an ancient and noble line of knights who took oaths to protect the cross. He wanted $2,000 for the lockbox and wood chips. That's not a story so much as the opening of a Monty Python sketch. A thief stole our heavy-duty snowblower out of the garage in early July during a heat wave and took it to a local pawn shop, hoping to fetch a big price for it. After the police called to say they had located it, the pawn shop owner said the guy just couldn't understand why there wouldn't be a hot market for an expensive snowblower year-round. Had a guy try get $100 for 2 wheat pennies and 2 buffalo nickels. 4-legged. About 5 years ago I had a guy call the store and ask if we took GPSs. I told him we did. Then he asked the address to the store. I told him. Then he asked me how to get there. Had a guy try selling me a gun. Before I could even nope him out of there. Shop is in NJ. We do not buy guns. He began to point the gun around with people all over the store, pulling the trigger. That guy was a special kind of guy. Fortunately the gun wasn't loaded, but still. I don't work in a pawn shop, but I bought my first guitar in one. The big defense contractor in my town laid off over 10,000 people overnight and the contagion spread. I was looking for my first guitar, and I'm cheap. After checking the music stores, I hit up the pawn shops near work. While I'm looking, this clean-cut guy in his early 30s comes in trying to pawn his guitar, hard case, and effects. Since the shop had a bunch, they offered him crap, evidently, and he left. He was almost crying, saying he got laid off and had to pay some bills. I followed him out and asked him what he wanted for it. He said $100, and I took it. I also gave him my phone number and said he could buy it back when he got back on his feet. I never heard from him. I'm looking at it now, and played for months. I hope everything worked out for him. As a musician, this is alternately an amazing and incredibly sad story. I worked in a pawn shop for around 7 years or so. We had people trying to pawn fake jewelry all the time. The best part was when they didn't know it was fake. So many women left yelling about that cheap son of a bee. I can't even remember half the stupid crap we turned away. There was one thing that we didn't turn away and we should have though. And I love this story. One of the other employees took in what he described as a 24K gold baby bracelet. It was a dong ring. A golden dong ring. This employee was a bit of a know-it-all, and he liked to rub other people's mistakes in their faces. He eventually went on to become manager, and then district manager, and you can bet your butt I made sure that every employee under him knew about the baby bracelet. He never lived that down. I googled golden dong ring after I read this. The first result was a website called La Dong Ring and the models had this intense look on their faces. Not a pawn shop, but GameStop. Dude rolled in with hundreds of bootleg games and a bunch of modded consoles. He couldn't fathom why I wouldn't take them. I used to work at one, and back when they took DVDs that was a constant issue. People trying to sell us DVDs they burned off their computer and getting mad we wouldn't take them. I worked in a jewelry store during the peak of the everybody buys gold and diamonds phase. A group of kids comes in with a ring they found in the parking lot. It's an obvious CZ, which I tell the ringleader, hell. As soon as he hands it to me, one of the others demands, a touch annoyed, how do you know? In one of those excellent 2 rare moments of perfect reaction I asked, why'd you bring it to me? Because you're jeweler. Oh. I took an old $10 bill into a dealer to see how much it was worth. Don't recall the year, but it was old. Guy says $10. Showed me what a bill would have to be like. Spent 30 minutes in his store with him looking at old rare money. I mean pretty much anything. People came in all the time thinking they could sell or pawn something for almost as much as they bought it new. Our policy was generally to buy for 25% of the new price, and only hire if it was an interesting or high value item. I always hated jewelry because you just knew the person was going to get P at your lowball offer. I paid $10K for this at the jeweler's and here's the receipt and insurance certificate. Unfortunately we go by the weight of the gold, which has a fluctuating market price, and the size and quality of the diamond. Going by our rates I can't offer more than $200, and I can't blame them for feeling insulted. It sucks because while some people pawn stuff to feed their drug habit, which sucks for them too, you know, many of them do it because their power is going to be shut off, or they can't afford food for their kids, or their husband's medical bills are slowly creeping up, and heck, I haven't worn this ring for years. Who cares if my grandmother gave it to me? It's gotta be worth thousands. Or the 100 other reasons poverty freaking blows. But you have to sit there and be stubborn, because you're poor too and your freaking s-face boss will deduct anything overpaid from your check. Pawn shops give you cool stories, but it crushes your soul. Yep, one of the big chain mall jewelry stores in our area was selling the heck out of 1-carat diamond solitaire engagement rings for $999. The worst possible quality of stones in the flimsiest of 14K mountings. We saw so many of them that the owner said to stop taking them, that they weren't worth dealing with even for the little bit of gold. I may be late to this, but I worked at a pawn shop for about 6 years. I once had a customer walk up to the counter and slide a gold coin to me and say, I think this is gold. Man, this particular customer reeked of bile and looked like he was high on everything possible. I looked at the coin and slid it back to him and replied, I think it's a Chuck E. Cheese token. I can tell by the mouse on it. He just said, oh, and walked away. That was when I noticed he had crap his pants to the point it was almost all the way down his pant leg. Thread MVP right here. There was a buy and sell by my house that would give you $5 for any game and sell every game for 10. I used to go in and check prices on all games, and if I would make more than 10 from GameStop I would buy the game. Go to GameStop and sell it, and then buy all the crappy games GameStop had that were less than $5 and take it back to the buy and sell to make more money. Worked at a traditional games store. Had plenty of sketchy white trash people coming in with their kids' old Yu-Gi-Oh and Magic cards thinking they're extremely valuable. Usually it was just a mismatched starter set from the early 2000s. Or the like. I'm not sure what started the idea that old trading cards were going to be ridiculously valuable, but no, I won't give you money for your dark magician. The level of disappointment, and oftentimes outright anger on their part, was difficult to deal with. I began just telling trashy looking people, who weren't store regulars, that we didn't purchase cards. Did once have a guy bring in a collection that had a gnarly looking Black Lotus. Gave him a good deal for it. A starter deck Dark Magician fetched around $150 last time I checked, albeit in like 2013. Black Lotus though, frick yeah. As a worker in the ghetto I get grills and gold teeth almost daily, straight from the mouth, and then they get mad when I can't accept it and throw a fit. Every employee wears panic buttons to call the cops immediately if something happens as well. Every employee wears panic buttons to call the cops immediately if something happens. I'll take signs you should get a job elsewhere for $300, Alex. A good friend of mine owns a pawn shop in Florida. He once bought a collectible book of state quarters for less than face value of the coins. The customer wasn't bright enough to pop the quarters out of the book and spend them. My buddy's ability to keep a straight face in those situations and make the customer feel like he's getting a deal provides me endless entertainment. I'd gladly pay 2x the face price of the coins for the US Virgin Islands quarter, US territories, and I believe a Puerto Rico quarter. My friends knew I had a quarter collection back in high school, so when they found a Virgin Islands quarter they taunted me and put it into the vending machine to buy chips. A month ago, man stole a lawnmower from the front of our store. Well, just 2 days ago, he returned to the shop with the exact same lawnmower, claiming it was his. He tried to sell it to us. Not only did the serial number on that mower match the one we had, but it still had our price tag on the handle. Worked at a comic book and memorabilia store, and people have really messed up notions of value. Just because it is old doesn't mean it is valuable. Just because it is rare doesn't mean there is a market for it. The worst was when people would come in with things that were signed with no authentication and demand outrageous prices. Some old lady and her obviously tweaker granddaughter brought in a comic they claimed was signed by Stan Lee and wanted $1,000 for it. We laughed them out of the shop. Also, a picture of you with William Shatner that he signed has no value to anyone but you. I used to work at a pawn shop in Los Angeles. One time this guy brought in $100 two bills, non-consecutive, and wanted a loan of $120. My boss told me to do the loan, so I followed instruction and gave the guy $120. The guy then managed to not come back for the bills, so we made an $80 profit from sheer stupidity. Babbage's aka Gamestop, worker in the early 2000s. This was a case of the company being dumb. Gamestop either owned or acquired Funkoland and a couple other game store brands at the time, Babbage's being among them. We had a local guy that would drive about an hour each way and buy out every single copy of certain NES games and then bring them to our store. He would do the same in reverse as well. The company would then dutifully redistribute the games to equalize inventory between the stores. All told, he made close to $50K before they figured it out and disallowed transactions of 10 games or more in one visit. Last I heard, this same guy was churning manufactured spending on gift cards, credit cards, etc. to the tune of $60, $70K a year. Dude knows how to hustle. Not a pawn shop worker, but this is still kind of a cool story, or at least I think. Either way, both the shop owner and I were happy with the events that went down. I used to frequent yard sales, buy vintage items, and then take them to the antiques shop and make a little money on the side. One day, I found this little glass figurine at a yard sale for $25. When I flipped the item over and saw the red Occupied Japan logo, I got extremely excited and bought it on the spot. I took it over the shop and sold it for $45. The shop owner wouldn't go any higher, but hey, I made $44.75 of a quick purchase, so I wasn't too worried. The figure was actually worth about $125. Either way, I made money, and that figure is still sitting in his shop for sale at $125. Be right back. Writing Occupied Japan on all my stuff. Yeah bro, this is an Occupied Japan flat screen TV. I don't work at a pawn shop, but my friend does. People bring in dumb crap all the time to get a few dollars for dope. It starts from a candies box stolen from a shop next to the pawn shop to plungers, rubber ducks, electronics, real and fake jewelry they thought was real, and ending on cars. I'm not sure you fucks with bucks would be happy about stolen ducks. Kind of the opposite, but in the mid-80s I worked for a guy that ran food trailers that went to different festivals, etc. It was a blast of a summer job. But anyway, kids would dig around the house to find money to blow at the arcades, and for food, rides, etc. Many of these kids would get into the coin collection, seeing a 10 or 20, but not realizing they were silver certificates, silver quarters daily, Indian head pennies. Even had a guy pay for his drink with a roll of Buffalo Nicholas. Musical instruments. Sorry, your student flute from 1970 is tarnished and dented. Not to mention that the cost of replacing the pads and corks will be more than buying a brand new student flute. Keep it for the memories. They are worth more than your crappy flute. 10 years EXP and running a pawn shop. Fake Rolex watches. Family heirlooms. Parking lot buys that turned out to be fake were the normal. Weirdest thing I've loaned on would be dentures. I'd give the guy 10-20. I was asked why I took them and my response was always the same. If that sucker wants to eat solid food again, he'll come get them. He always came and redeemed them. I manage a pawn shop trading post in New Jersey and could tell you hundreds of stories related to this, but the dumbest thing I've had someone bring in was a used lifelike sex doll. It was something that you pay somewhere around $3,000 to $5,000 for. He was just completely flabbergasted that we would not buy it. Used book dealer here. I had a couple tell me they were bringing in a book they saved for their retirement in a safety deposit box, a signed first edition of Twain's Huck Finn. Sadly, they had a modern Reader's Digest copy with a monograph signature. Someone else offered me their Shakespeare's First Folio, printed in 1946. Not a pawn shop worker, but I was in one with a friend of mine when a man who looked to have enjoyed more than just a few crack rocks in his day came inside with a sink. A sink that he apparently just ripped out of a hotel or kitchen of an abandoned house or something, and I do mean ripped out. No idea what he thought he would get for it, but the guy behind the counter told him in no uncertain terms that he needed to leave and take his sink with him. It was goddamn Hiller. OP dead. My mom owned the pawn shop in town and she was a huge New Kids in the Block fan. Unfortunately, eBay decimated our business and she couldn't afford to see their reunion concert. But her best friend from grade school could. She came in the next morning, wielding what she claimed was a condom full of Joey McIntyre's CM. You could be the mom of a new kid. She wanted $1,000 for the stuff, but my mom told her friend to stick it up her vajayjay. I'd like to buy it if she still has it. Worked at an auction house rather than a pawn shop, but it's the same principle. I once had to deal with a woman who brought in a badly damaged, chipped, dog child chewed, simple, pine bookcase. She informed me that she had paid $200 for the bookcase 10 years ago and that due to its appreciating value she expected to receive at least $1,000 for it now. She was very put out when I suggested the most she was going to get was $20 and only if someone wanted it for their shed. I went to college in a farm town in northern Colorado. I had a red leather jacket that I bought in high school that I wanted to sell in one of the pawn shops out there. I never wore it and would rather have cash than the jacket. I didn't want money for drugs, just money because I was a broke college student. They refused to buy it because it was red and that color was somehow gang related. I had no idea that farm town had any gang problems, but whatever. Well, everyone knows that northern Colorado is Crip territory. Of course they wouldn't want the red jacket. My fiance works at a small-time retro gaming store and tells me stories all the time about getting people in and wanting to sell their copies of Madden 2006 for $30 because they saw it on eBay for that much. Probably once or twice a week she'll get a really cool item, but mostly it's trash that people dump off for their drug habit. When I worked at Guitar Center, we would have people come in to sell us used gear all the time, which was cool. Usually they didn't expect too much for it, unless it was actually something good or rare or vintage. But people would hear that vintage guitars are worth good money and think I bet that Squire I got in 1997 that is all crusty and old is worth something and get mad when we would offer them $35 for it and sell it for $70 because it was gross and somebody could buy a brand new one for $100 or $120 depending on if there was a sale on. My favorite was the one guy who came in with two garbage guitars. I think one of them might have been a bass, that were missing strings and nuts and knobs. They weren't worth much even in good condition, but in the shape that they were in, it would cost more to get our in-house technician to repair them than he would get for them. Because we weren't in the business of buying broken instruments, we told him that if he wanted to sell them to us, he would have to have them repaired first. And I was completely upfront with him that the cost of the repairs would be more than we would pay him for the guitars. He decided to do it anyway, and gave me a big stink about how he drove a half hour to come here to do this and took an hour and a half out of his day and how he felt like he should be compensated. When I called him the next day to tell him that the repairs were done and that we would be able to get him his money for the sale, he yelled at me over the phone for interrupting his golf game. Frick this guy. I just have to say, I've only tried to sell something to a pawn shop once. Some kind of CB radio setup and related components, and they offered me $20. When I told them that wasn't enough, they laughed at me and said I wouldn't get a better offer anywhere else. I ended up selling it on Craigslist for $300. On Craigslist you're selling to people who may want the item. When you go to a pawn shop, you are trying to sell something that they want to then sell. I'm not a pawn shop owner, but when I was 10 or 11 I caught a black widow spider and excitedly brought it to the pawn shop in town inside a Mountain Dew bottle, ready to claim my bounty. They weren't interested. Pet shop wouldn't take it either. I made a cardboard sign and stood on the side of the road, but I never found a buyer. Give this man a pawn shop. He knows what is really valuable. Pawn shops are not like that TV show. People don't bring in valuable antiques to be appraised. I would guess the most likely answer for real pawn shops is wedding rings that end up being fake. I work at a used bookstore and had a customer come in with very good condition DVDs, books, and CDs. Our old way of buying things used to be that we would judge every single object that came in based on condition and determine the price from there, usually around $1 if the book was in good condition. However, we now had a scanning system where we would scan a barcode and a price would be generated based on prices of it online, regardless of condition. Back to the customer. She's a scrawny old lady and looks pretty much like your stereotypical witch, but with a tank top and shorts. She comes into our store often and usually sells a few cutfuls of books and DVDs. With our old buyback system, her total would usually come out to around $70, a higher amount than most buybacks, and would sometimes throw a small fit if she didn't get enough. Now she comes in after we implement our new buyback system. She sells the usual cartfuls of books and DVDs in really good condition, but now her total came to around $17, and she flipped her crap. She asked, "Why do you have to use this piece of bull's buyback system?" Started calling us random slurs and insults. She also knocks her books down and calls us racist just because I'm white. "You gotta be racist against me, why do I have this treatment?" She demanded to talk to the manager, and he came. He told her that's just how it is now. You don't have to sell to us if you're not satisfied. He mentioned that the company had to change the system because we weren't buying books and stuff at an accurate price. Lady didn't want to take it and tried to shame us by telling everyone around her and the mall that we were racist against her and that she'll call the cops. She called the cops on us, but when they came, she instead got arrested for public disturbance and was subsequently banned from our store for some time. I worked at a game stop in college and someone asked if we traded for cash. I told him yes, and he brought out a calculator, a NES light gun without a cable, and a rock and asked what he could get for them. Tweakers, man. I run a video game store and several people weekly bring armloads of old Madden, NBA, and other sports games and thinking they're going to get all kinds of cash. They're very upset when I give them $5 out of pity. Then there are the moron pawn shop employees, or smart depending on your perspective. I regularly see used crap Harbor Freight tools marked up higher than new. Just last week I saw a $129.99 central pneumatic air compressor they were trying to sell at $199.99. Can't verify if this is true or not, but I remember my grandpa recently talking about some guys who robbed a house and decided to pawn off the spoils. The only problem was that the stuff they stole was actually from the pawn shop owner's house, who then called the cops on them. Managed a pawn shop in Michigan that was not American Jewelry and Loan, and these were the Higge lights. Someone brought in brass paper clips trying to convince me they were gold. What was clearly the top of a TV tray trying to be passed off as an antique painting. And my personal favorite, teeth, because they were around a gold tooth. I've been working at a pawn shop for about 9 years, so there are countless ones, but a favorite was a girl brought me a solid gold 24K ring to sell, and it was a plastic LOTR ring from a board game. Tons of others, but that one is one of the best ones. That wasn't a sad story. Pawn shop manager here. Been in the pawn business for about 7 years. I have seen just about everything, but I have this one customer who takes the cake. Guy comes in to pick up his pressure washer that he has already pawned several times, signs that he has redeemed his item after checking it out and saying, "That's the one. Have a great day." He then proceeds to walk out to his car with it and then promptly storms back into the store with it, proclaiming it isn't his. I calmly try to figure out what the problem is as he is going ballistic. Turns out the serial number was put in our system incorrectly, so I could not prove it was his. I went ahead and informed him a mistake was made on our side and I would replace it with a new one from Home Depot. Apparently that was not okay. He then called me a B several times over, as well as a nigger cunt. Never been called that, had to Google it. Ended up having to call the police on him to have him 86'd from the premises. Turns out he is bipolar and doesn't take his meds. Recently had a young kid come in. He had a rare $1 coin. It was a US $1 coin with Ulysses Grant on it. He claimed his grandfather gave it to him at birth, and he had it over 10 years before he was born. He supposedly found it on the internet for over $100. I had to be the bad guy and tell him the coin wasn't even minted until after 2000, and it was still only valued at $1 in the current condition it was in. I also have this lady customer who comes in with jewelry and wants close to retail price. I struggle with her every time she comes in. One time I offered her $15 for a piece she had, and she told me, "Well, you're just gonna turn around and sell it for over 30. I replied, "That's how it works, otherwise I wouldn't be in business." If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.